Bună seara, bună ziua, Alexandra. Alexandra, mă auzi? Doamne, tu ești singura care a intrat din nou, am avut probleme. Eu nu înțeleg, ori sunt eu complet nepriceput, ori o problemă cu Zoom, dar mi-a dat, uite că au mai venit doi. I have to talk in English because there is someone who doesn't know Romanian. But it's a big problem. Every single day I make a mistake. I mean, I don't know if I make it. The system, the Zoom system, records. I don't know how. There were 2 meetings chosen for today, but I only scheduled 1, so I don't know what to say. Anyway, you got in. I was a little bit, you know, depressed because I know it's Monday, and on Mondays, you know, people have other things to do than attend, you know, strange events, regardless of whose birthday it is, because today is Frank Lloyd Wright's birthday, which I thought of celebrating controversially by showing also the work of his adversary, meaning Le Corbusier. Yeah, but I fail continuously. It's almost every day I have a technical issue, and it's very possible the only responsible one here is me, not the system. But I don't understand. I don't drink. I'm you know, as lucid as I could be, but I don't understand what is happening. Anyway, we are 5 people for the moment, and maybe we won't increase too much. I hope I will not disappoint you. I am prepared. I have things to show, but I am boiling a little bit, because why do I have to go through this torture every day with people writing to me alarms like Emmanuel, you know, I want to get in, and the message is there is another meeting going on. What other meeting? Anyway. Yeah, I know I'm excessive, because I plan from today on every single day at 6 p.m. to, you know, to provoke the architectural community, so to speak, with you know, maybe hopefully an interesting subject. But it's a hard job. I don't know if I can do it, because it just sending people messages every day, it consumes me more than actually preparing for the talk. So before, let's wait. Maybe, you know, it's already late. It's 6:22 or 6:23 Athens time, Bucharest time. But I want to ask you something. I want to ask you, what do you think of this quotation from? I'll do the share. I'll share the screen so you can see it. Just a second. Okay, where is the screen? Okay, share screen. Okay. 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 Do you see the quotations from Frank Lloyd Wright?
Yes.
Now, what do you make of this quotation? The only thing wrong with architecture is architects. What do you think he wanted to say? Be courageous. Speak up with your mind. Because it is paradoxical. I mean, he was an architect, almost the quintessential architect. Why would he say the only thing wrong with architecture is architects? Alexandra, do you hear me?
Yeah. I don't know. I'm thinking that more often than not, and
as it has been proved along the years, that people, even without architects, architecture still exists, and spaces occur organically, and people procure their own shelters and according to their needs and their beliefs. And I think architects sometimes just come and think that they can dictate how people can use the space around it, the environment around it. And sometimes they're wrong in the way they dictate it. So I believe, yeah, I don't know. I think it's a sort of suggestion that architects should be more humble towards the people that use their, well, it's not even actually their architecture, because it's for the people, to use their service that they provide, that they should be more humble to, and more trustful towards people, that they would know how to engage with their space and how to appropriate their space to themselves, not according to a program given by a certain person.
It is perfectly valid what you said, and I agree with you. But the strange thing is, or the paradox is, that Wright was not a humble man at all. And still he was against the architects. So obviously he had something against the architects. Now it is true, he was not licensed, so to speak. He didn't even study architecture. He studied engineering for 4 semesters. But he was an architect. If there was an architect, that was Wright. And I personally think I understand him. And it is related to what you said, Alexandra, because yes, architects have often the illusion that they are kind of godlike, and they can dictate, and then their will is, almost beyond, doubting or failure, and that their talent also is unquestionable. And yes, there is a certain arrogance, hopefully not so much in the female architects, and it's a new phenomenon in a way, because now we have more, at least here in the School of Architecture, there are more, let's say, girls than boys, and I think this is a good thing. I truly think it's a good thing. But I mean, you can see even on this page, and if you look at pictures, including from his office, there were only men, only males. I would say even more than men, because I think there is a difference between male and man. And once I did a series of projects, which is self-induced, so to speak, a house for a female, a house for a male, a house for a male and a female living together, and a house for a female, a male, and their children living together, and then face to face with it, a house for a man, a house for a woman, a house for a man and a woman living together, and a house for a man and a woman and their children living together. And I think, I mean, there is a difference between male and man, and between female and woman. But coming back to Wright, indeed, he was, I think I understand why he was, he saw the ravishing work of the architects all over his land, because yes, we talk about Wright, we talk about Sullivan, we talk about a few other people, but what about the large majority of architects who disfigure the earth? Many of them are not really skillful, and they are not really sensitive. And the thing is, exactly those who are not very sensitive are usually those who build the most. Well, not in the case of Wright, because he built himself a lot, but he's an exception almost. Because someone less sensitive is more asserting, and he gets commissions, and he has that, willpower, or that, cocky verticality. But he's right. Wright is right. The only thing wrong with architecture is architects. And what you said, Alexandra, coming back to you, is valid. Yes. In fact, I sometimes think of how would the world be without architects, and I don't think it would be a bad world. In fact, you know, there are beautiful, not that I idealize them, but they are beautiful African villages or Native American dwellings, or anywhere in the world. You know, there are vernacular architectures that are very beautiful, that do not step beyond a certain threshold, and they don't eat up the resources of the world. And so people built them without architects. On the other hand, I turn against myself and say, well, nothing wrong with a world where Palladio existed. So it's all right. So I guess, you know, we do need the architects, but the world can function quite well without them. Or maybe it's a thought that I have. What about the non-architectural architect, the unarchitect that Cedric Price talked about? What if we have unarchitects instead of architects? We just put an AN in front of architects, you know, unarchitect, which is also related to the anarchic architect. He is almost an architect who turns against himself or herself. And by doing so, maybe paradoxically, he serves more life and the people and the earth. Maybe. Because there could be an arrogance in that too. Anyways, he has interesting thoughts. You know, you can find, if you search for quotations from Wright, like for example, this one, there is nothing more uncommon than common sense. True, true and very well put. You know, we talk about common sense, but it's so hard to find. It's also very hard to find for myself at the level of my own life and my own decisions. It's very hard to have common sense. Or he says, the good building is not one that hurts the landscape, but one which makes the landscape more beautiful than it was before the building was built. And I like to think that he's right, but I don't know. How many buildings do make the landscape more beautiful through their very presence? How many? Not many. Or this one, the truth is more important than the facts. Now, this is an intriguing one, because we as so-called moderns have a tendency to think that truth is defined by facts. You can see it everywhere, on TV, in newspapers, these are the facts. But, but Wright thinks that truth is more important than the facts. In other words, truth is a little bit different than facts. And it happens that Albert Einstein thought kind of in the same way. So then I am asking you, and then afterwards maybe we'll show some images. What do you think truth is? And what is fact? And why is it that Wright thought that truth goes beyond facts? What do you think the relationship is between facts and truth? I know it's a difficult question. I'm not sure I can answer it myself. I probably can't. That's why I'm asking you. What do you think it is? Why is it that facts are not necessarily truthful?
I'm also thinking that sometimes people choose their own truth or the truth that they want to believe in, and often ignore the facts for various reasons. So that might also be a point.
No, but here he says that the opposite, that the facts ignore the truth. Because by saying the truth is more important than the facts, this means the truth is not defined by facts, or not only by facts. Einstein said in life, what can be counted doesn't count, and what does count cannot be counted. And usually facts are countable. Yes, but for Einstein, what can be countable or what is countable is not what counts. So then what counts? What counts in life? If the facts are the glorious facts that society celebrates, schools, academias, presidents, everybody wants, these are the facts. But it seems that for Wright, the facts are not so, exhausting the possibilities of truth. That the facts are also, I would say, a little bit fictional. And I think they are, because truth, I think, or reality, or the real, is more complex. It's not just the measurable, the well-defined, the obvious. Truth is elusive, is subtle, is actually immeasurable. And facts are measurable. So this is a difference. Facts are measurable. They have to do with the obvious, but the obvious is not necessarily true. Here I think also of what Dostoevsky said, that what we think reality is actually is not reality. True reality is some kind of, well, I use my own words, but the idea that Dostoevsky expressed was this, that true reality contains also the so-called the fantastic. What we do not include into the real, but the real is so complex that it cannot be expressed exclusively through the mechanisms of the measurable. And so I guess Wright is not far from Kant in the sense that both, and not just them, understood that, a great building, to quote Kant, and the quotation, is the one that starts with the immeasurable. In other words, not with the facts, but with something that is beyond the facts, beyond the measurable. But unfortunately, we are so obsessed with facts that we forget that valuable true reality, which belongs to the uncountable, what cannot be counted. Like feelings, emotions, love, even hate, which is also immeasurable. Things that are, you cannot measure them in inches or centimeters. You cannot count them because they operate with different engines, so to speak. Anyway, it's interesting, and I suggest to you, if you want to open up his quotations. And yes, they are fragments of thought. It's in the nature of a quotation, but sometimes in a condensed form, it does give you, something, a feeling of the essence of his thinking. But there are also risks, because these quotations sometimes, they are even modified or extracted from a context which itself is important. But it is worth thinking, about this distancing himself from the architects, while he was obviously an architect. And a similar attitude had Le Corbusier. And since I mentioned Le Corbusier, I will start by a little bit unconventionally, because his birthday is Frank Lloyd Wright's birthday. I will start with a PowerPoint presentation on Wright and Le Corbusier, because I think these two men, and it happens that they are men, I hope in the 21st century there will be women, and one of them already suggested herself into a possible representing the 21st century, and the one we are talking about. But he's not the only one. He's not just Zaha. In fact, I would gladly put near her Lina Bobardi, for example, and she was actually near Zaha in a poster in London, dividing in two, so having equal space with Zaha. So you had an exhibition on Lina Bobardi and Zaha Hadid, and it's not easy to share a poster with Zaha with an equal spacing, I think. Anyway, I'll start with Wright and Le Corbusier. Do you see Villa Steingarch? I mean, do you see the screen with a PowerPoint? This silence kills me. Hello?
Yes, yes, we can see it.
So you see it, right?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Please do not be silent because I panic, because I know I make mistakes, technical mistakes with this. I'm still not mastering this. So do you see the title now, Frank Lloyd Wright and Le Corbusier?
Yes.
Okay. So, Le Corbusier was younger. Le Corbusier was born in 1887 and Frank Lloyd Wright in 1967. In 1867, so there was a difference of 20 years between them. I don't know what Le Corbusier thought of Wright, but I do know what Wright thought of Le Corbusier. He was not very happy with Le Corbusier, not very fond of him, but that might have been also envy, I don't know. But Wright in general was very critical of the Europeans, including the great Renaissance men. But as an Italian critic told me, Luigi Prestinenza, he said, Dan, never trust the words of the architect. Architects say one thing and they do another thing, and I kind of noticed this, maybe in my own life and my own work, so to speak. Okay, right. So he was born today, June 8th, in Wisconsin, in the United States, in 1867. Unfortunately, I will show two buildings that I also showed yesterday in this presentation, but I'll also show other things that I didn't show. And of course, we'll begin with the famous Falling Water from 1935. So he was already, 68 years old when he built this provocation to nature, talking about architects, larger than life, so to speak. He himself, I think, would have had some reasons to include himself into that group of infamous architects who, against whom he actually was. Now, this is not Frank Lloyd Wright. Obviously, this is Mr. Kaufman. He was the client. Falling Water was built for him, thanks to the mediation of his son, Kaufman's son, who studied a little bit with Wright and who was, I think, an art historian, and you'll see him. And he convinced his father, to trust Frank Lloyd Wright, of course, to build this very famous building. You see them here, Wright on the right and Kaufman on the left. Kaufman does look like a boss, does look like a client, considering his position on the armchair, with his right foot and his right leg, kind of pointing upwards in a significant, symbolically, I think, in a significant position. So we know with whom we are talking here. It's Wright was not the most humble man, and I don't think he was, dwarfed by that shoe of Mr. Kaufman pointing upwards. They are at Eliason West here, but the story goes, from what I read, is that Wright knew about this project, but he didn't do any work. And one day he received a telephone call from the man on the left, meaning Mr. Kaufman. Frank, I want to see the plans, the studies you did for Falling Water. I don't even know if it was called at that time, Falling Water. So I'll be at your office in 2 hours. So Mr. Wright, with his genius, it is said, and you can find testimonies about this, in 2 hours, he produced all the drawings in an almost accurate way. I mean, the final drawings, the working drawings, were almost identical with what he did in those 2 hours. The plans just came out of him, so to speak, naturally and intensely. So in 2 hours, the master produced them. And he was accepted by Mr. Kaufman. So again, what you see here is the interior of Taliesin West. But the story I told you happened at Taliesin East in Wisconsin. Because as I mentioned yesterday, he had 2 residences, a summer residence and a winter residence. You will see actually this one. This is the man who did a job of mediation. The one on the left is Kaufman Jr., the art historian. Maybe he also studied some architecture, because I think he was a student of Wright. And of course, the master is in the center, and Kaufman on the right. I noticed the shoes of the master, almost white, or anyway, very light in color. He was eccentric, but he probably also had people who cleaned up his shoes. I imagine, like other influential and rich people. Now, could you tell me whose legs, I mean, do you know the identities of the people here depicted in this picture? Probably not. In fact, I'm afraid I forgot myself. No, it's the Kaufman family. This I know. But I think the big client, so to speak, Mr. Kaufman Sr. is on the left. In the center is the son, the art historian. You can see he has a book. And on the right, the mother. Hello, hello. They were interesting people and very, very successful. Mr. Kaufman was a very rich man in Pittsburgh, and yeah. But they also loved, you know, artistic eccentricities. Falling Water, the building is has a number of significant artworks by modern artists. Anyway, now this is a more recent picture. The one with the glasses is Kaufman Jr., and the woman with the white hat and the white dress is actually the wife of Frank Lloyd Wright after he died, and they are at Falling Water. I talked about the third wife of Frank Lloyd Wright yesterday. I think it was Croatian or Serbian, or from around here, so to speak. Drawings. Again, you notice the cutting of the expanding the sky. Here, not completely, but it is noticeable. Well, here it also happens at the bottom, but you see the bottom of the drawing is bigger than the top. And usually in classical drawing lessons, you are told to do the opposite. Even when you draw a vase with flowers, you have a slightly smaller space at the bottom and more space at the top. But in the drawings of Frank Lloyd Wright, is the opposite. Very often, there is more space at the bottom, meaning where the earth is, and less at the top, where the sky is. Here, the same thing, you see. This is an aspect of Wright's work that I don't think was mentioned, and I think it's important. In the relationship between the earth and the sky, he seems to prefer the earth. The plan, the entrance is, if you see my, you know, my arrow, my mouse, yes, the arrow of the mouth is through here. There is a pergola here, very interesting one, and I hope I have a picture with it, where a beam is is avoiding a slender tree. It curves itself around the tree so it would not cut it. It would not interfere with it. Very nice. And the water is here, you know, it's there is a bridge, you go through here. At the top, there is another house for the guests. And the water, you know, flows underneath the big terrace and the living room. And that's where the problems were. And we'll see pictures with those problems, because it was necessary a very big intervention to solidify the building. Yeah, a large living room, but yes, the living room is large, but the ceiling is not as high as I would have expected for this size of a room. You can find many, you know, entries on this subject on Google Images or YouTube and so on. You probably know that there is an aspect of this building that differentiates it from the common understanding what a building should be or could be in the proximity of a river or a lake. What Wright did here was unique in the sense that he didn't want to make a building that from which you could look at the water. He actually he brought the building above the water, so you don't see it so much as you hear it and you feel it. He wanted to marry, if I can say so, the fire of his building with the water of the river. Well, in this particular place, the river becomes, you know, a falling water. But and this is why there were problems with the structure of the building, because he went a little bit too far. But I understand why. But he was not modest when he did this. Instead of looking at the falling water, he wanted to almost embrace the falling water. And nature has always the last word, not man, but nature. You know, name it gravity or falling water or rain. And by the way of the rain, maybe you know this anecdote, and it seems it was true, that one day Mr. Kaufman, that you saw, called in the middle of the night Frank Lloyd Wright to tell him, Frank, it is raining in the living room. And Frank very casually told him, well, Edgar, you don't have a pot? So this was Frank Lloyd Wright, you know. He didn't care too much about the fact that it was raining in the living room. Just put a pot there and it will take care of it. And by the way of this, I have to tell you, wherever I lived, I had this problem. It didn't matter. It was in Sibiu or Bucharest or New York or Chicago. The rain still enters through the terrace, it's unbelievable. It's like, it doesn't matter how skillful the workers were or the architect. There are always problems. And at this building too, in this building. So this is the main house. As I said, there is one kind of northeast that is dedicated to the guests. You can see it here. It's actually northeast. So this is the guest house. It's even written guest wing. Now you see here this tree, and I hope in fact you can almost see it in this picture, how, you know, the horizontal man-built element curves itself around the tree, so the tree would grow unhindered by it. Initially, he wanted to paint the parapets of the terraces of the balconies in gold. And only Kaufman convinced him to stop it. And he settled, or they settled, for a very, very light pink. They are not white, but they are not gray. It's a very, very light, pale pink, which is also maybe a strange choice a little bit. This is the floor, stone from the place. He designed everything, of course, the sitting areas as well. And now, like in a dream, I actually don't believe I was there, but I was. But I don't know. It's strange. When I was there, I wasn't so impressed. Maybe I was blind, or too introverted, or I don't know. When you have great expectations and you go somewhere to a destination where you are supposed to meet God, so to speak, when you do meet him, maybe you are not so impressed. I don't know. You see, this is what I'm talking about. An homage to the tree. Because otherwise it would have gone straight through the tree. But I like this. I mean, this detail it should be projected in all schools of architecture, or should be commented, because Wright understood what a tree meant, and this is in a forest. In other words, with thousands and thousands of trees. The house is in a forest. Yet he protected one single tree. He didn't cut it. He made this effort, almost a rhetorical effort, to go around it, to avoid it. And we do not do this. We do not do this in the schools of architecture. We cut trees like nothing, like they do not exist. And this is being done in many places, and we still talk about, problems with, the quality of the air, and, the dying of the nature, and sustainability, and so on. And this is what the architect does. And this is the architect Frank Lloyd Wright was against. This, almost unknowing architect, who, full of himself, cuts down trees to build I don't know what nonsense. I mean, I think the reverence for the trees is extremely important. And that's why I think this image is very important. If we take care of the single blade of grass, I'm not even talking about trees, I think we make silent steps towards a better world, and towards protecting nature and protecting what truly matters. Unfortunately, we don't do this. And there are very so-called important architects who have no problem to cut down trees, cut down bushes, because they are not important. They would only respect oaks. But this is a slender tree, it's not an oak. But he still respected it. And I think it's a beautiful picture. Man and nature not in conflict. Man is actually humbling himself in front of nature. This is a sculpture by Lipschitz, an important sculptor. They had a collection, of course, but they loved modern art. And, so they were enlightened clients. During construction, the fall of falling water. Now you see, I mean, this is nature, and this is the nature that Wright wanted to marry himself with through this building, not to look at, but to be together with. And it's like in love, you don't look at the object of your love, you want to be together with it's not even appropriate any longer, the object. You want to be together with the one you love. Here he wanted to be together with the water that he loved. And this was the conflict, because it was an alchemical attempt, in a way, the fire of his building, the creative fire, but also, as we discussed yesterday, because he placed in the center of the house, the fire, he wanted to marry actually fire with water. And architecture in its very essence is, and metaphorically, is fire. It is fire. Brick is fire. The work itself, the technology is fire. Is symbolically, metaphorically, it is fire. So, in a way, architecture cannot be green, if we are to be honest, because in its very essence, it is red. It is not green. It is an affront almost to nature. It is something, even if you are right, even if you do things, you know, admiring nature, respecting nature, the very foundation of a building is already a violence to nature. And maybe that's why Lebesgue said architecture is war and war is architecture, although I think he went a little bit too far. But there is that aspect. Architecture is by its very nature, at least a little bit against nature. But still, Wright, as I said, wanted to be together with dramatic falling water. Mr. Kaufman. Even during the construction is interesting. I mean, these pictures, you know, this is the history of humankind. You have man, you have the human being trying to find a place for himself in the world, and inevitably is in some kind of a conflict with nature. This is not a modest building. No, it's not. It's actually an oppositional force to nature. And maybe he's right that a building would make a landscape even more beautiful than it was before the building came into being. Why? Because in contrast with the oppositional presence of architecture, nature manifests itself or herself even more beautifully. So they enhance each other. But you can see here, this is done after the repair works, very extensive works, because the courage of Frank Lloyd Wright was punished in time by, you know, the structure began to deteriorate. And when I visited it, they were collecting money to invest in this, and you'll see pictures of the very extensive work done to sustain the building. This is the website where I found pictures about the process of taking care of the building. You can see you have technology, you have workers very well equipped. There is a lot of action going on there to protect the building. Look at them. It was not a joke. So in this case, Wright was not quite right, because the building was affected by the courage to come so close to the falling water. This is an interesting detail. It's from the living room, and you see, you wouldn't expect that you actually go down the stair. Here it is a stair which goes to the water, but you know, it's not a typical entrance to a staircase. But I think I have another picture where this opens the vertical part of it and the horizontal. So then you can see here, what is on the left becomes what is on the right after you open the enclosure, both vertically and horizontally. Interesting. I never saw this one before, something like this. Now they might have to repair the building again, because so many tourists go there to see the building that, you know, the building might fall apart because of the tourists. I still think the ceiling is just a little bit low. Well, there are hanging pictures here. I don't think Wright would have agreed with this painting on the stone wall. he even said that pictures on walls, they more often deface the walls than decorate them. And it might be that he was right. He loved nature, obviously, but he loved himself as well. And this building is a celebration of himself and of nature. I don't know if in this order. I mean, it just crossed my mind that here the falling water in a way is balanced by a falling building, but falling not literally, although it almost became literally. In other words, the volcano of the conceptual and real volcano of the house is balanced by the liquid volcano of the falling water, if I can use such a language. The liquid, well, the volcano is liquid because of the lava. So that curious access to that I showed before with, you know, opening both the vertical part of it and the horizontal part led to this stair that you see here, and where you have a small platform from which to, you know, be close to water and contemplate the water in the intimacy of being very close to it. And the access of the house is over this bridge and then to the left through a dark corridor, and then you reach the living room. This is the pergola which goes to the guest house. Now you can see a silhouette through the door. The ceiling is very close to his head. That's the bedroom, the master bedroom. And the terrace in front of the master bedroom is quite large. In fact, maybe disproportionately large, considering that it was a private room, not a public one. I mean, was not the living room. But this is the fire here. This is the fire, the fireplace, the chimney, the stove. Now we go to Le Corbusier to compare his paradigmatic building, his signature building, Villa Savoie. Yeah, they were built almost around the same time. one in Europe, one in the United States. And you probably visited it. I did too. So very different this building from the other one. Here you have the European extracting himself from the Greek Apollonian tradition, the quest for order and whiteness and some kind of idealized geometry. But this building in its own way also attempts some kind of a dialectic with nature. You know, the building, I personally have some doubts about this building because those slender columns, you know, if you had a drunk driver, you know that the project came into being in a way starting with a car. And so the first floor is conceived, is designed in such a way so you can go around the building with a car, but I don't know. Those slender columns might not like very much a car approaching them. It depends, of course, on the skill of the driver. You can find on the web everything you want to know and even more about this building, as you can find about the falling water. It's a machine for living, but I personally think his Le Cabanon, that very modest dwelling, and we'll arrive at it a little later, is superior to this famous Villa Savoie. Although this one is celebrated and the other one is not. And the paradox here is that you have the so-called free facade, as in fact it is written there, but it's not free at all. It's just a straight wall with a horizontal window. So you wonder, where is the freedom? It's actually a restricted facade. It's an almost square with a perimeter line clearly defined. And so I wouldn't call it a free facade. It's paradoxical. Why would he call it, or why would it be called a free facade when the external expression of it is as if it is not free at all? So the radius of this circle here on the first floor plan is the one required for a car to go around smoothly, so to speak. But it's, I don't know. The columns I find problematic. And it is a significant space offered to the cars here. 3 cars, and not the smallest in the world. But at that time, you know, there was this fascination with cars and not with bicycles. Architects usually love cars. And so when they do a project that is banal, they just put a voluptuous car in front of the banal house or project. And they, you know, give the impression that the project is very interesting because of the car, actually. Now, this celebration of the car, of course, we can talk about because it's a problem with it, especially from today. If we look at it, do we still believe in this magnificent discovery of man in cars that eat up oil, and then we wage wars to get that oil, and we pollute the air, and so on? No, the human beings have a problem. I mean, we kill the earth, that's obvious. And the architect has a hand at it. We are, I think we should share the guilt. Even the greatest architects, you can see they are serving, I would say, the wrong gods here. It's an inflation of what is called, maybe wrongly, the human. It's an opulent building, of course, just like Fallingwater is an opulent building. Who can afford such a house? It still amazes me that this, almost square, clearly defined, claims of having free facades. Of course, it depends what you mean by free. This is the back facade. Well, you'll see some examples. Several artists and architects rebelled against this building, but this is typical where you have the creative sons and daughters rebel against their fathers and mothers. You know, you rebel against the authority of your predecessor. There is pink here too, but inside, not outside. There is a chimney, there is a hearth also, but almost decorative. The gardener's house, this one amuses me because the gardener looks towards the house of the boss from a cubicle. It's done in the same spirit, but here you don't have the car moving around the first floor, which is just funny in a way. I think the two buildings should be discussed together. And then talk a little bit about the equality, about égalité, fraternité, liberté, in sarcastic terms, of course. I personally think we need more gardeners than architects these days. Maybe the gardener should live here, and the members of the Savoy family in this building. For a change, you know. To provoke another revolution, maybe. Drawings. It is said, I don't know if it's true, that Wright, Le Corbusier did many times the so-called preparatory drawings, sketches, after the buildings were built. So the studies for the building were done after the building was built. And if you look at the drawings, it does seem so, you know, it's in a way too clean, it is self-conscious, you know, it's done in a self-conscious way. It's almost an illustration. This is not a study. This is a rendering almost in ink. The chairs are his as well. Apparently, although he claimed the authorship, it was Charlotte Perriand, a brilliant woman architect who worked for him, who did some of these sittings that Le Corbusier claimed were his. This happens often when the woman is, relegated to a second role, although her role was essential. I mean, he did the same thing with Yanis Xenakis, who actually designed the pavilion in Brussels. And at first, Le Corbusier claimed that it was totally his work, but I understood later on he softened his position under the pressure of other people who knew better. Now here it is an interesting detail because it is a bathroom, and apparently Le Corbusier liked, I don't know, the mistress of the house, the lady in the house, the owner, Miss or Mrs. Savoy, and it is said that he did this thing which opens towards these chairs, where the lady would come out from the bathroom and would lay here, and the architect, with his love of beauty, would just sit on, well, not necessarily these chairs, but on a chair here, or even standing up and look at the beauty of the owner of the house. I don't know, but because it is open here, and this thing is, there might be books written just about this. And if they are not yet written, maybe they should be written. Yeah. Well, the subconscious of the architect is always present, you know, even in the most brilliant ones. You cannot repress totally, you know, the irrational or the non-factual, you know, if you want to call it this way. So very different, the building from Falling Water. And I actually think that comparative architecture or comparative study of architecture is good. Just as Wright said that a good building makes the landscape more beautiful through contrast, by studying in parallel, in this case, Villa Savoye with Falling Water, they enhance each other and you can understand them better, perhaps, through their opposition, through the other one. It just happens that in this case you have two buildings that are somehow of equal importance for architecture, and they are, you know, peaks of the creative work. The building was almost destroyed immediately after the war. In fact, during the war, I understood they deposited, you know, I don't know how you call it in English, this grass that cows eat. It was a ruin almost, and it was a ruin. And yeah, it was almost demolished. Thanks to André Malraux, who was the Minister of Culture at that time in Paris, in France, the building was saved. There are all kinds of a posteriori, you know, studies and, you know, center of lives. I don't know, maybe, but I don't know if that's how he worked. Well, this is the car Le Corbusier laughed, and there's such a contradiction almost between the modernity of the building and the archaic look of the car. Bernard Tschumi on Villa Savoye. The most architectural thing about this building is the state of decay in which it is. Architecture only survives where it negates the form that society expects of it, where it negates itself by transgressing the limits that history has set for it. Interesting statements. Of course, he was rebelling against the father, maybe against his own father, who was also an architect, a Swiss architect. The relationship with son and father, or mother and daughter, or son and daughter, you know, father and daughter, and so on, is interesting because psychological matters cannot be neglected. Bernard Tschumi again, to really appreciate architecture, you may even need to commit a murder. Architecture is defined by the actions it witnesses as much as by the enclosure of its walls. Murder in the street differs from murder in the cathedral in the same way as love in the street differs from the street of love. Radically. Well, he became the dean at Columbia University in New York for many years, about 15 years. Yeah. The advertisements for architecture, that's how he called them. He was a provocateur. Good for him. But they saved the building. They saved it, and now it's a touristic destination. Students in architecture, perhaps. And it was ready to go. Look, it was a cowshed with hay. That was the word I was searching for, hay, in 1950s. Look at it. Actually, I don't want to be cynical, but I kind of like it like this. Because the natural world, the cow or the hay, kind of overtake the building from the inside. Maybe that's what Bernard Tschumi referred to. Now you probably know these images where this artist uh, uh, um, defaced the building, you know, with his graffitis, which are done, you know, digitally. Quite well done. Well, excessive whiteness deserves, I think it deserves such actions. Taliesin West. We go back to Frank Lloyd Wright. This was his summer residence. I mean, summer, quite the opposite, winter residence in the north, summer in the south. I mean, he went to the warm climate during the harsher weather in the winter in the north. We saw some of these pictures yesterday. So this was where he was spending his time when the weather up north was not so pleasant. It was not just a house or a home, but also his studio. There were many students there who worked for him and worked with him. He even worked the land. They even worked the land. They took care of the animals. They cleaned the house and so on. We discussed about this yesterday. I will not insist. Um, but it is an important building in his work. Not just because it is his home, his other home. And you see these little houses built by students after his death. I showed them yesterday. Back to the stone, back to the red, you know, steps. I show this building because, in contrast to it, you'll see Le Cabanon by Le Corbusier. So this was the home of Frank Lloyd Wright, and you'll see the home of Le Corbusier, which is so very different. And they were about the same age when they lived there. I don't insist on this building because I showed you it yesterday, exactly this material. This was not a modest man, and it shows. It's a big campus, but it's not arrogant as architecture. It is horizontal. It still is in some kind of harmony with nature. Le Corbusier, Le Cabanon. Now you will see the very opposite of the previous building. A most modest, almost masochistically modest building. Here is the master, Le Corbusier, looking through a window like my grandmother had in the village where she lived. This is the very opposite of the window that we saw at Villa Savoie. Can you believe it? And you will not believe your eyes when you'll see actually his office, because this is his office. Of course, he is contemplating the Mediterranean Sea, in which he actually died at 78 swimming. But still, this is not, can you imagine that the man who designed Villa Savoie lived in this way? There are two buildings. It's Le Cabanon, the living quarters, and this is so-called his office. This is the house. It's actually a room, 16 square meters. It's reduced to a minimum. It's very modest. Look at the chairs. There are two boxes. The sink is part of the room. You see the toilet not far away. The bed is actually a wooden platform, just like the one Brancusi lived on in Paris. This is the plan. Here, number 2 is a door that leads to a restaurant that brought him food, a modest restaurant. There was room for 2 beds, one for him, one for his wife. But although he claimed he built this Cabanon, Le Cabanon, for his wife, he actually used it. There are all kinds of theories about this building. You'll see there are books written about it, as modest as it is. And it's good that there are books written about it, because I think it's very important. It's very important in all its modesty. It's almost, I think this building should be very relevant for us today. Because this is a sustainable building, if we are to use this word. I mean, look, it's almost like a first year student's project. Maybe even a first year student project wouldn't be allowed to be like so, so small, so simple, so almost insignificant. But it's the flourishment of an architectural thinking of one of the most important architects towards the end of his life. But there are foundations now. There is a whole business, prospering because of this building. That's the building. You see it near the tree. And that's the master with his horse. So this is a digital rendering. And this is the project. Very nice. The very opposite of Villa Savoie, and the very opposite of Tailliers and West by Wright. Now, what you see here, number 5, is a very modern building and very important by a very important architect and designer, Eileen Gray. You see here, Casa de Eileen Gray. And she built it for herself and her lover, who was a Romanian theoretician, an architect actually, Jean Badovic. And this is Le Corbusier. And they were actually friends. And this is the so-called office of Le Corbusier, which is about 2 meters by 4, or I don't know, 2 meters by 3.5. So this is Le Cabanon, number 3. This is the restaurant. This is the office of the great architect. And this is the villa of Eileen Gray and Jan Badovic. I'll show you some images, but you can even access and view a film, an HBO movie or a Hollywood-made movie about this house and about the triangle between her, Eileen Gray, Jan Badovic, and Le Corbusier. This is a picture with Le Corbusier on the left, his wife Yvonne in the middle, and Jean Badovich on the right. Born and raised in Bucharest. He was an interesting man and he influential. He published and promoted the works of Le Corbusier, and they became friends, as you can see. Le Corbusier doesn't look too happy, but maybe he was drunk. Now, this is the name of the villa, which is very important for modern architecture. Designed by Eileen Gray on the left and Jean Badovich on the right. It seems they worked together on this project, but she's considered the main author. It's called E1027, the name of the building. And they are based on, you see on the, the position of the letters, if I'm not mistaken, in the alphabet. J is the number 10 letter. Eileen, I forgot exactly. Gray is 7, the 7th letter. So E1027, the name, its naming or its code is derived from their names. Eileen Gray, and E stands for Eileen, 7 for letter G. Then 2 is from Badovich, letter 2, no B, and then 10 is Jean, J. Anyway, this is the house, and it's not at all a bad house. It's actually very important, and perhaps it's as important than Villa Savoie and as important than the Falling Water. But it was designed by an architect, a female architect, a very well-known, but still a female architect, and because of it, her villa is maybe, it is a little bit less known than Falling Water and Le Cabanon, or Villa Savoie, actually. It's a good building, and this one also passed through a difficult time when it was almost ruined, and it was restored, and now is the subject of this film. I recommend it to you. And no, I didn't recommend to you because I don't know if it's a great film, but it is a film about this house and Eileen and Jean and Le Corbusier. But I don't think it's a great film. A commercial Hollywood production. Wow, what can you do? It's probably, scandalously chic, probably. So this is the house. She was rich, Eileen Gray, and it shows. She built it for herself and Jean. She was an excellent interior designer, a very, very interesting person. She was also 20 years older than Jean, if I remember correctly. Here is Le Corbusier laying casually on the bed of Eileen Gray and Jean Badovich, enjoying himself as if he was at home. Incredible how irresponsible can be even the greatest of us. Anyway, even smoking the pipe there. I don't know who the man on the right is, but the one on the left is Le Corbusier. And so is the artwork above his head, is also done by him, was done by him. Now it seems he defaced the wall of this villa with this, incised drawing. This was done by Le Corbusier without the permission of Eileen Gray or Jean Badovich, and there are malicious comments about this. There is even a picture, I don't know if it is here, with Le Corbusier naked. I don't know why he was naked, maybe working on this drawing. Let's see if it's not here. Yes, he did this drawing without the permission of the owners of the house. I think this is a scene from or I don't know, from the film, from the movie. This is Eileen Gray, this is her villa. Their villa, but designed mainly by her. This is Jean Badovich. Hello, Mr. Badovich. Now this is the office of the great master Le Corbusier, 2 meters by, let's say, 4 meters. It's incredible now. If you compare it with Taliesin West, and if you compare it with almost any architecture office in the world today, doesn't matter how mediocre the architect, it is just amazing. But I'm very happy that Le Corbusier enjoyed being here, and that's where he did the plans for Chandigarh. So in other words, you don't need a big space in order to make big plans. Yeah, that's his office, and look at the windows. I mean, they have nothing to do with the windows at Villa Savoie. They are the very opposite. Bravo to him. I like this fact that Le Corbusier turned against himself, and he didn't become a dogma. Well, he even said, brisez les écoles, même l'école Le Corbusier, break the schools, even the school Le Corbusier. These are, I don't know to whom he wrote, but this is a letter by Le Corbusier with his surroundings there near the Mediterranean Sea. He's inside the Le Cabanon here, you know, like a kid sitting on a box, on a wooden box, drawing. That's the house. Very nice. I admire him for this. The windows are just like the windows of my grandmother in Transylvania. So you don't need a huge glass wall in order to so-called embrace nature or be embraced by nature. No, because that embracing is of a qualitative order, not quantitative. It has nothing to do with complete transparency, which is still a barrage, is still a frontier. It doesn't matter, you make a whole wall glass, you are still separated from what is outside. And it's actually only an illusion that you are united with what is outside. You are not united. So the demagogy of glass, to use the title of, I don't know if it was the title, but there is a very good book written by 15 or 15 American women architects. And one of the articles was written by the editor of the book, Andrea Kahn, who wrote about the demagogy of glass. And I do believe she was right. Glass can be very demagogical. What you see here is the entrance into the so-called restaurant. Probably the only client of the restaurant was Le Corbusier. Very nice. Bravo, master. Now you see a view on the left lower corner, you see the Eileen Gray building, and the little cubicle with the 2 windows is the great office of the great architect. Here he is. And the drawings on the wall are studies for Chandigarh. He was going to change the world, so to speak, from this cubicle, from this small nest. This is inside Le Cabanon. Now, this is a sustainable building. We talk about sustainability. Mr. Sir Norman Foster talks about sustainability. It's total nonsense. Sir Norman Foster uses violently big and sophisticated technology to create so-called a sustainable environment. No, this is the road towards some kind of ecological approach or sustainable approach towards realizing some kind of harmony between nature and man, between the earth and man, and so on. Art is present near the sink. Nice. Part of life. The bed. After all, we don't need much. He's a view towards his office, his atelier from the house. Look at this vertical, thin, slender window on the right. His office. The house, Le Cabanon. But there is creation here. Even this window, the opening in the wall is not so simplistic. You can see there's even a mirror there and the folding panel, and it's interesting. He drew beautifully. I like the sketches of Le Corbusier. It's just one room, really. This is on the left, the door to the restaurant, and the artwork, which it's almost fresco. It's a large size artwork, but on a very narrow. I can't even call it corridor. It's the access into the villa, but it's very very minimal. Hello, monsieur. Bonjour. Nice hat. Yes, he died. He died swimming at 78 towards the sun, as Kenneth Frampton said. Now we go back to Frank Lloyd Wright, to an urbanistic study. When he was deprived of clients, he turned inwardly, so to speak, and conceived a visionary, settlement, human settlement. I cannot call it a city. I cannot call it a village. Broadacre City. And you can see it. We worked for quite some time. He worked more intensely for about 10 years, but then for other 20 years, he kept coming back to it because he wanted to change the world, so to speak. And it's not a suburb. It's his response to the need for a human way of living on the earth or from the earth that was not the typical city, and that was not a village either, and it was not, certainly was not the typical suburb. Maybe further study is necessary for this very complex otherwise work, because to work even for small periods of time during these 30 years, it meant something to him. Interesting, these drawings. You see the buildings. You can see even the phantasms of buildings he actually built. This is similar to the Price Tower, and but they are interesting. These flying, they are almost drones, flying machines. The cars are interesting too, with 3 wheels, very futuristic. Nobody asked him to do this. He did them, because he wanted to imagine the so-called different way of life. But even the best architects have their moments of naivete. You see here, you actually see his built works. This is the synagogue he built based on the plans for a cathedral for 1 million people in New York City. This is the Price Tower, although, that was already built. What is it doing here? Yes, in a way, we are all children. It doesn't matter the genius of the creator, he still has his vulnerabilities. He even has the Johnson wax tower, which I showed yesterday here. And here he suggested a 1 mile tall, long, tall tower he proposed for New York City. But what is he doing here in the plane? You see how how childishly thirsty or hungry for recognition are all of us. Maybe starting with the architects, those very architects he was against. This was his idealized vision, you know, his vision for the future, filled with his buildings and drones, or you know, let's call them some kind of helicopters, or I don't know what. A nostalgia for pastoral landscape turned into a utopian. Yeah, it's an agrarian or utopia. There is a word Arcadia in a way, but not totally, because there are some. I mean, the tower for 1 million people for 1 mile tall tower is not really very pastoral or Arcadian for that matter. Painted wood. Yeah, it's a big model. Here is, I don't know who that young man is, maybe his son, one of his sons. Yeah, the students contemplating their work. They work hard for Mr. Wright, or Mr. Wrong, as they used to call him sometimes. Many people, only men, as far as I can tell here in the foreground. I think there is a woman there in the background, but things things change. Today it is different, and it's good that it is different. There is no woman student here, only men. And the master, of course, he himself is a man. Uh, a boys' club, Plan Voisin by Le Corbusier, because Corbusier also had a period of a few years, from what I know, more than 3 years actually, where he conceived these plans because he didn't have commissions. So he dedicated himself to the task of erasing a very large part of the old Paris and proposed his dream, a Cartesian dream. Some even go further and see something, you know, close to certain ideologies that are not very luminous. He wanted order, but what is order? You know, and with what sacrifices you achieve that order. So this cross, this is one of the buildings. You know, the plus sign or the cross, one of the towers, which would free the space he thought for landscape and so on. But I don't know. The price is high. Fortunately, it was not built. And cars running madly on the big highways. Well, not so much now because of the pandemic, and not so much now because of the climate change, which he didn't expect or anticipate. So even at the highest level, human beings are still limited, and we cannot provide provisions for a future we cannot really anticipate. sufficiently well, if I am to put it in gentle terms. Heliports and who knows, other structures meant for the triumph of man over nature. Although you saw that in his later years, he returned to a different kind of living. The architect as God, pointing towards his creation in a godlike manner. Well, this is a recent rendering. It was not by him, it's digital, of course. I don't know if his buildings would have looked like quite like this. A little bit different from what we see here. Probably it would have been an impressive, crystallization of an urbanism that he, promoted, but I don't know. I don't know if I would have felt very much at home there. Fortunately, there are trees, and you can see in the sketch on the left, the trees are bringing some subtle movement and life into what otherwise would be excessively rigid. Otherwise, the plan is nice. I mean, even graphically, there is some kind of urban weaving here, the urban tissue. Not so much in the rendering. Well, it seems in Angola, they try to get inspiration from his urban studies, and that's what they did. But it's not just in Angola. Many, cities in the communist bloc, former communist bloc, were not very dissimilar. So very different from Broadacre City. But it's interesting that both Frank Lloyd Wright and Le Corbusier dedicated some years to urbanism, theoretical studies, so-called visionary studies. You see, modernism, rationality, order, and the motor car. That very motor car that Kenneth Frampton, for example, said that destroyed the city. And maybe he was right. Maybe. Plan Voisin, Paris. From the Bolshevik constructivists to a Le Corbusier-led Siam, urbanism was the ultimate tool for change, a deus ex machina for social transformation. So this is a digital rendering of what was not built. Now you see a complex of buildings in New York, built kind of in this period by a developer, political figure, Robert Moses. It's here. Yeah. You wouldn't expect to find in New York too many socialist or, yeah, ideas. Blocks of flats. What else? Modernity. Social concerns, big population, and so on. Behind, in the background, capitalism, voracious as ever. But the plan is interesting, kind of interesting. It has a center that is green. And this plan also has some diagonals, so I think that's good, actually. Now we go to a building again by Lloyd Wright, which I showed yesterday, because I wanted also to comment on two religious buildings, one by Lloyd Wright, one by Le Corbusier. This is the Unity Temple that I showed yesterday, and I won't insist too much on it, but I want you to compare it to Saint-Pierre de Firminy Vert, the church built not by Le Corbusier, but designed by him and built after his death, which is less known than Ronchamp, but still a significant architectural essay, if I can say so, on addressing sacrality, if I am to use such words. So this is Unity Temple in Oak Park, near Chicago, a suburb of Chicago. And it is built for the Unitarian religion, a denomination I'm not very familiar with, but there are many, actually, many religious denominations. His family was involved with this religion. I don't know if him, Lloyd Wright, was, but he built this temple. It's not a church, it's a temple. Very cubistic. I commented yesterday. I said I visited it. I was inside this building. I didn't really feel too much the presence of the divine, but it's a very good building. It is integral. It has integrity. All parts are connected, and so the whole reflects the parts, and the parts reflect the whole. I showed these drawings yesterday as well. It's very different from the building by Le Corbusier, and we'll arrive very soon to his building. Support, because the buildings of these great masters do need from time to time and not a very long time to be repaired. They do have some problems, and they are not so old. The building is stately, solid, and devoid of religious iconography, serving the Unitarian faith. Now, we arrive at the building by Le Corbusier, which was built after his death. It's an interesting church. I visited it. I was inside it. I looked at it from the outside. Inside was unbearably cold. I visited in January, and I was freezing there. It was actually colder than outside because of the concrete, and probably didn't have any heating. I don't know. His drawings, which he left, and based on these drawings, they built the church after his death. And I'm glad they did. In Firminy-Vert, there are 4 projects by Le Corbusier: a unité d'habitation, the church, a stadium, and the so-called culture building, the House of Culture. Is the city besides Chandigarh with the largest number of, well, not really, Paris has 2, but this is a very small town ravished by economical problems. So this is the inside of the church, Saint-Pierre de Firminy-Vert. It's a very nice building. This is a sketch by Le Corbusier. And this is the building. And I think they built it well. There was an architect who took care of this, and I think it was out of love for Le Corbusier and for architecture. And I appreciated him. I appreciate him for this. So you see on the left, l'unité d'habitation. You see the Saint-Pierre de Firminy-Vert. You see the stadium and the culture building, the House of Culture. It starts from a square base and it grows towards the circle in a way. And so it respects the traditional sequence from the square to the circle, from the earth to the sky, from man to the divine, which is illustrated copiously also in traditional sacred architecture. More explicitly, but is the same, I cannot call it strategy, is the same, maybe natural sequence of layers of depicting this relationship, complex, but also simple in a way, between the earth and the sky, between man or human beings and God. The play of light on the walls is very nice and continuously changing, unpredictably so. He's not afraid to use primary colors in some parts. He did the same at La Tourette, which is not far away. Firminy-Vert is like 1 hour from Lyon, and so is La Tourette. They are both very close to Lyon. It's worth going there. It was built with some effort. It was necessary to get funds from many people, donations, and over a long period of time. But in the end, it was built. You see, for a while, it was like just like this. Great section. Some artistic, so-called artistic pictures with a blackened sky, but the building still lit quite well. This is Claudius Petit. He was the mayor of the city and a friend of Le Corbusier. So he helped him, I mean, he commissioned him to build these 4 buildings in Firminy-Vert. Maybe he was instrumental also with, no, he was not involved with Ronchamp, but the picture shows him with a model of Ronchamp. I like this picture of Le Corbusier's room. I like the beautiful order of the books, how carefully he displayed them on the shelf. This is the architect who made the efforts to build the work by Le Corbusier. And I admire a lot this lack of egocentrism. He dedicated himself to erecting the building of another architect. Very beautiful. Not too many people who do this, because it required a lot of tenacity, a lot of effort, and he was up to it. Now this is a picture with 2 famous architects seen from the back, looking at the wall of Saint-Pierre de Firminy-Vert. The one on the left, they both died kind of recently. On the left, Raymond Abraham, and on the right, Levi Souds. They were friends and they flew from New York to see this building. Now we go to the last 2 works, one by Wright and one by Le Corbusier. Unfortunately, I showed the same work that I showed yesterday, the Guggenheim Museum by Wright, and I'll show the museum in Tokyo by Le Corbusier. I won't insist too much on the one by Wright because I showed it yesterday, and I think the people who are the large group of people who are watching this presentation was present yesterday. Guggenheim, yes. The great collector Peggy Guggenheim gathered a large number of great artworks which she purchased conveniently in the early stages of the development of the future great artists. And because of this collection, this building came into being. Everybody knows this building. And there are now offsprings, like the Guggenheim Museum in Bilbao and others that are either a plant or it's cultural. It became almost cultural colonialism. This is the drawing of a previous project depicting an observatory, and the Guggenheim is somehow this building upside down. Peggy Guggenheim near Frank Lloyd Wright, and I don't know who the one, also someone from the Guggenheim family on the right. They had to pay for this building, and I imagine it wasn't a cheap building at all. So we are now 3 people here. I am one of the 3 people. I don't know who the other 2 are. I don't know for how long I will have the energy to create these presentations when actually the interest is not very it's not very encouraging for me. When I did the event, it was an event with Lebia Suits. Many people showed up because they were attracted by Stephen Hall and Wolf Prix, although they didn't contribute in any significant way to the event. But they came because, and this is the world we live in. External things attract us, and not necessarily what truly matters. You know, if we have a star present somewhere, people flock, even though the star doesn't actually do almost anything. This is the world we live in. You know, we are seduced often by I would say you know, almost superficiality. I mean, I don't know if the other two people who are here now were present at the meeting on Sunday, the previous Sunday, not this one, but the other one. Anyway, I shouldn't be bitter, but I am a little bit, because I make a big effort to make these presentations. I prepare myself, and the interest is not large, although I do advertise it. Many people know it's true, it's Monday, and Monday is a difficult day, but there is no reciprocity, or it's discouraging for me. It's disproportionate, the effort I make and the response. So I have to think a little more if I continue to do this or not. I do it with conviction. I do it with passion. I do it, nobody asked me to do this, but I don't think it is very much appreciated, my effort. What can I do? But I do appreciate those who do make time to come and to participate. And I thank them, or you. Anyway, this I showed yesterday. But at least we thought a little bit of Frank Lloyd Wright today. I don't know if too many people thought of him on his birthday, but we did with the three of us, or five of us, or four of us. We thought of him, and maybe somewhere he's smiling a little bit, you know, noticing our action. This one I showed yesterday, this Italian artist creating this extravagant display in the core space of Guggenheim. Kind of an imago mundi, an image of the world, this installation. And now we go to the last segment of this presentation, which had more than 600 images. A museum built in Tokyo by Le Corbusier. He died in 1965, so he was, you know, around 70 years old when he built it. And it's interesting to compare the two buildings, because the spiral is here present too somehow, but in a geometrized way. It's very different from the Guggenheim Museum. It's a smaller museum, but he was always preoccupied about an endless museum. This is not quite endless, but it does have this circular movement within a square. You see, Museum Unlimited Growth from a project from 1931. This is the project here. It's not quite a spiral, but almost. We're using straight lines. So the Guggenheim and this sketch resemble each other a little bit at the conceptual level, although the geometry that they use is very different. Because it is about the growth of culture, this unending quest of man in a way, and art is part of this quest. You see, studies for the Endless Museum. There is also an Endless House, a project done by an architect not totally unimportant for Romania, because he was born in Cernăuți when Cernăuți was part of Romania. I think he even knew Romanian, and he lived for a while in Bucharest, and unfortunately he didn't acknowledge his connection with Romania. He acknowledged only his connection with Vienna and with New York. I'm talking about Frederick Kissler, who is very important and very appreciated today by students and young architects, and not just young architects, very well known in the West. And he has a project called Endless House, the Endless House. Here we have the Endless Museum by Le Corbusier. So this is the museum by him in Tokyo. The circulation within a museum is important, and this is shown both in the work by Le Corbusier and the work by Frank Lloyd Wright. We are approaching the end of this presentation, which was only half an homage to Frank Lloyd Wright, but it was an oblique homage as well by showing him dialectically vis-a-vis his other there is another, I forgot, there is another pair of works. This Kunli house, from the houses I saw built by Frank Lloyd Wright, this is the one I admired the most. In fact, I admired it more than Falling Water. Because I saw the influence of Japan. I saw a very subtle aesthetics at work. I really loved the Kunli house, which is in a different suburb near Chicago, not in Oak Park. I remember I almost danced around this building with my camera. I was very emotional, and I couldn't get too close because there was an enclosure, a fence, a wall. It's an opulent villa, although certain parts of it were for sale at eBay some years ago, not too expensively, a garage or a fragment of the house. You could have bought a fragment of the house for a certain amount of money. I like this house, and I felt the influence of Japan very much so here. It's a big house, as you can see. Here you can see the Wasmuth drawings. This was the first publication, major publication with his works in Germany, and he was very fond of this book, a book with the works of Frank Lloyd Wright. I'm talking about, yes, him. Frank Lloyd Wright was very, very fond of this book. A big house, a big estate. And now this is, we are finally at the final moment in this presentation, Villa Steingarch by Le Corbusier, where his principles so convincingly, maybe too convincingly displayed and sustained are at work. You know, the 5 points, the pilotis, the horizontal window and so on, the free facade, the less free car, still an antique, but he was a visionary, so to speak, in terms of architecture, but not so much in terms of the design of the cars, although he loved cars, apparently, like any architect, unfortunately. I don't think Le Corbusier would have admired Kenneth Frampton, considering he's saying that the car destroyed the city. Even Wright was very fond of cars, although he claimed he loved nature, but he loved cars as well. Well, the typical, you know, aesthetics. That's why I like so much Le Cabanon by Le Corbusier, because there is a different Le Corbusier. Is less dogmatic, actually, freer, more modest, and more poetical or romantically speaking. Look at him. He's happy driving the queen of or the king of human technology for so many years, for many years in the 20th century and maybe even now, I don't know. The wheels, the car, the speed, the running away, the cutting down the trees, the building of the highways, the movement of the people, moving all the time in China, in India, in Brazil, in France, in the United States, in Romania, in Ireland, everywhere. We move. We eat up oil. Who cares? We need to move. We need to be on the move, forgetting what the great thinker Pascal said, that all the troubles of humankind are because the human being cannot stand or stand still in a room. Fortunately, I don't want to sound, you know, disturbingly provocative, but in a way, the virus now, the coronavirus, is forcing us to reconsider certain things and be less mobile. But I'm sure that once the pandemic ends, the crazy movement will continue, and we will continue to build highways, and we'll continue to produce millions of cars, and we'll continue to dig into the earth for so-called new resources. We continue to exploit the earth until we blow it up. Will never end. So I understand the pessimism of a French contemporary writer who expected that after the pandemic, that humankind will be actually the same. We will not change. And in fact, we will be a little bit worse than before, because the psychological mechanisms of frustration will generate in us a desire to revenge ourselves in even more explosive forms of exploiting the earth and actually bringing it to an end. It's terrible what is happening. We should be able to just be quiet in a room without the pandemic, just to to understand our limits and be creative, yes, without ravishing the earth. But this is not happening. And it will not happen. I know the big construction sites will continue, the 1 mile towers will be erected, and so on. It's almost like a fatality. Men provoked, of course. It didn't come from the gods, it came from us. Anyway, this is Villa Garches by Le Corbusier, when he had different ideas than those he arrived at later in his life, and illustrated by Le Cabanon. It's a good building, of course, but there is a but somewhere. This is it. I ended. Is anyone left here? Hello?
Mai este încă o persoană.
Poftim?
Suntem două persoane, domn profesor.
Okay, so I'm curious who is the other person.
Nu știu.
Who is the other person? Silence. Hello? Who is Anna? PC Anna. Who is PC Anna? Hello? She doesn't. Who is PC Anna? Because I do not know you from the name.
Maybe she's not by the computer right now.
Pardon?
Maybe she's not by the computer by now.
Ah, so she just left it anyway. Yeah, I'm a little bit tired. Normally I would have continued, but I was also a little bit, in fact, I should stop recording because